Marcus Thompson stood alone in the quiet hospital break room, the faint hum of vending machines mixing with the distant beeps of monitors down the hall. His blue maintenance uniform was still damp from mopping the emergency wing, the faint scent of disinfectant clinging to him like a shadow. At 32, Marcus still carried the broad-shouldered frame of a man who once dreamed of college football glory. But those dreams had long faded. Life had thrown him a different playbook. Now his calloused hands gripped a worn mop handle, steady but tired, as his eyes lingered on someone through the open doorway. Dr. Eleanor Grace. She sat at the small table by the window, a paper cup of coffee in one hand, a stack of patient charts in the other. Her silver hair, pulled back into a neat bun, caught the glow of the evening city lights behind her. It made her look like someone out of a different world, poised, graceful, and far too refined for the chaos that surrounded her. Eleanor was only 28, though her prematurely gray hair made her seem older, wiser. A gift from her mother's side, she'd once joked, though Marcus sensed the weight behind her calm expression. There was something about her, quiet, steady, the kind of person who didn't just heal patients, but steadied entire rooms. Marcus had been working at Mercy General for 6 months, mostly evening shifts. He cleaned hallways, replaced light bulbs, and scrubbed floors that never seemed to stay clean. During the day, he went to community college, grinding his way toward an engineering degree he couldn't afford to give up on. 2 more years, he told himself. 2 more years, and life might finally change. Every Tuesday and Thursday around 7, he'd take his break. And there she'd be. Same seat, same cup of coffee, always lost in her notes. And every time, Marcus found a reason to linger a little longer. Sometimes just long enough to hear her hum softly to herself as she worked. But tonight was different. The hospital buzzed with talk about the upcoming charity gala, the one night when Mercy General traded its scrubs for tuxedos and gowns. Staff were encouraged to attend, and Marcus had overheard the nurses teasing Eleanor earlier that day. "No date this year, Dr. Grace?" One of them had laughed. Eleanor had smiled politely. "I think I'll survive," she'd said. They didn't know what Marcus knew. They didn't see how she brought extra sandwiches to the break room fridge every night, always unlabeled, so the cleaning staff, who sometimes skipped meals, could eat. They didn't see her staying late after her shift, sitting beside elderly patients who had no visitors, whispering small comforts into the quiet. She treated everyone, chief surgeon or janitor, with the same gentle respect. And that, more than anything, was what had drawn Marcus to her. Taking a slow, steadying breath, he wiped his palms on his uniform and stepped into the break room. Eleanor looked up, her tired eyes softening the instant she saw him. "Long shift, Marcus?" she asked, setting her pen aside. "The usual," he said, his deep voice calm, even though his heart was pounding hard enough to feel in his throat. He hesitated for a moment, then took another step forward. "Actually, Eleanor, there's something I wanted to ask you." She tilted her head, curiosity lighting her face. The fluorescent lights above caught a shimmer of silver blue in her hair, and for a brief moment, the world seemed to pause. The fluorescent light flickered softly overhead, making Eleanor's silver hair shimmer like moonlight. Marcus took a steady breath. "The hospital gala next Friday," he began, then hesitated. His fingers tightened around the mop handle as doubt crept in. What would people think? A janitor asking a nurse to a formal charity event, he could already hear the whispers. But then Eleanor looked up at him, curiosity and kindness glinting in her eyes, and the fear melted just enough for him to go on. "I was wondering," he said, his voice low but sure, "if you'd like to go with me, as my date." The air between them froze, thick, quiet, electric. For a few long seconds, the only sound was the hum of the vending machine. Eleanor blinked, her expression shifting, first surprise, then something gentler. something almost vulnerable. "Marcus," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Are you sure?" He gave a small, nervous smile. "Pretty sure." Her brows lifted. "The gala tickets are $300 each." "I know," he said with a quiet laugh. "Been saving for a while. Though I should warn you, my dancing peaked at my high school prom, back in 2010. That made her laugh, really laugh, the kind that warmed a cold, sterile room. Mine peaked around the same time," she said, shaking her head with a grin. "Then we'll be perfectly matched in our mediocrity," he said, smiling now. "So, is that a yes?" Eleanor's eyes sparkled as she nodded. "It's absolutely a yes." The week that followed passed in a blur of nerves and anticipation. Marcus rented a tuxedo, cheap but crisp, and practiced his dance steps in the narrow space of his studio apartment. He tried not to think about how out of place he'd look among the hospital's donors, executives, and board members. But every time that anxiety crept in, he thought of Eleanor's laugh, and it steadied him. On Friday night, he drove to her apartment, a modest building tucked between a bakery and an old pharmacy. For someone so poised, he'd expected something grand. But Eleanor lived simply quietly, and that somehow made her even more remarkable. When she opened the door, he forgot how to breathe. Her navy blue gown shimmered like the night sky, the color deepening the warmth in her gray-blue eyes. She wasn't draped in jewelry or heavy makeup, just elegance in its purest form. "You clean up nicely, Mr. Thompson," she said, looping her hand through his arm. Marcus chuckled, trying to play it cool. "You look beautiful, Eleanor. Though, honestly, you always do." The gala was held in the grand ballroom downtown, a place so lavish it made Marcus feel like he'd stepped into another world. Golden chandeliers hung from the ceiling, and the polished marble floors reflected the swirl of gowns and tuxedos around them. As they entered, Marcus felt eyes turn their way. A few people whispered, some with surprise, some with quiet judgment. But Eleanor didn't flinch. She held her head high and smiled at him like he was the only person in the room. They danced under soft amber lights to songs that carried them both back to simpler times. Old Motown, slow jazz, the kind of music that made you sway without trying. When they missed steps, they laughed. When the song slowed, they didn't rush to fill the silence. They just fit. And then, during one of those slow songs, as he held her close, Eleanor's voice broke through the melody. Soft, hesitant. "Marcus," she murmured, resting her head lightly against his chest. "There's something I should tell you about who I am." He looked down at her, his eyes calm, his tone steady. "I know who you are," she blinked. "You do?" He nodded slowly. "You're the woman who stays 3 hours past her shift to hold a dying patient's hand. Who learns the names of every single person in this hospital. Doctors, janitors, security guards. The woman who sees people, not positions." Eleanor's eyes glistened as she lifted her head to look at him, the corners of her lips trembling with something between gratitude and disbelief. For once, she didn't have a reply, just a quiet, knowing smile that said everything words couldn't. And as the music played on, the whispers faded. For that one night, they weren't doctor and janitor. They were just two souls who had finally found someone who truly saw them. "That's not what I mean," Eleanor said softly, pulling back to look up at him. The warmth in her eyes was still there, but now it was layered with something heavier, something unspoken. "My father," she began hesitantly, "is Richard Grace." Marcus froze. The name hit him instantly. Richard Grace, CEO of Grace Medical Industries, one of the biggest medical supply corporations in the country. The same company that donated millions to Mercy General. the same name etched in shining silver letters above the hospital's new cardiac wing, the Grace Foundation. He took a breath, trying to piece it together. "Wait, your father is Richard Grace?" Eleanor nodded. "Yes." The ballroom around them continued to swirl with laughter and music, but for a moment, Marcus only heard his own pulse in his ears. "Why didn't you tell anyone?" he asked finally. "Because I wanted to be seen for my work, not for my last name," she said, her voice steady but soft. "I became a nurse against my father's wishes. He wanted me sitting in the boardroom making deals, carrying on the family legacy. But I wanted to be here where I could actually help people, where I could make a real difference." Her eyes searched his face nervously. Does this change things between us?" Marcus was silent for a long moment. You could see the thoughts crossing his mind. Years of struggle, long nights cleaning floors, the difference between his world and hers. But then, slowly, his lips curved into a genuine, easy smile, the kind that made his eyes crinkle at the corners. "The only thing that changes," he said quietly, "is that now I understand why you always look a little sad when people talk about money problems." Eleanor blinked, caught off guard. "You feel guilty," he continued, "for having what others need." Her eyes glistened. "Most people either want me for my connections," she whispered, "or resent me for my privilege." Marcus chuckled softly. "Well, I want you for your terrible dancing and for the way you always steal my French fries during break." That made her laugh through her tears. "You noticed that?" "Of course," he said, smiling. "And there's something you should know, too." She raised a brow playfully. "Oh, should I be worried?" "I'm not going to be a janitor forever," Marcus said, his tone sincere now. "I'm 2 years away from finishing my engineering degree, but even if I never left that mop behind, I wouldn't be ashamed of honest work." Eleanor looked at him for a long moment, her expression softening into something tender and proud. "I know," she said quietly. "I've seen your textbooks in your locker. Advanced thermodynamics isn't exactly light reading." Marcus laughed, shaking his head. "You've been snooping?" "Observing," she corrected with a smirk. Big difference. They danced until the night faded and the lights dimmed, no longer caring about the whispers or the glances around them. For the first time, neither of them felt out of place. They were simply there, two people from very different worlds who had somehow found a home in each other. 6 months later, when Marcus walked across the stage at his college graduation, it was Eleanor's voice that rose above the crowd, cheering louder than anyone else, and sitting beside her, clapping politely but with an unmistakable glint of newfound respect, was Richard Grace himself. The man who once doubted his daughter's choices now saw exactly what she saw in Marcus, the quiet strength of a man who never gave up. The following spring, they married in a small ceremony in the hospital chapel. The same walls that had seen their first shy glances now echoed with vows and laughter. Doctors, nurses, janitors, and friends filled the wooden pews, all smiling as Eleanor walked down the aisle, her father at her side, proud and tearful. When she reached Marcus, her father gently placed her hand in his and whispered, "Take care of her." Marcus nodded. "Always." Richard Grace walked his daughter down the aisle, his arm trembling just slightly as he held her close. The man who once measured success in dollars and boardroom deals now measured it in something simpler, in the smile of the man waiting at the altar. Marcus stood there in his tailored gray suit, his eyes filled with the same quiet determination Richard had come to respect. By the time they reached him, Richard's voice cracked as he placed Eleanor's hand into Marcus's. "Take care of her," he whispered. Marcus smiled, his voice steady. "Always, sir." In that small hospital chapel, surrounded by colleagues who had become family, two worlds finally came together. Not through wealth or status, but through love built on mutual respect and kindness. Years passed. Marcus went on to become a respected engineer, designing sustainable systems for hospitals across the country. Eleanor never wanted to forget where she started. Opened a series of free clinics in underserved neighborhoods, small places that healed people not just with medicine, but with compassion. But no matter how far they went or how much they achieved, some things never changed. On quiet evenings, long after the world outside had fallen asleep, you could still find them in their kitchen, barefoot, swaying to those same old songs from the night of the gala. The music would crackle softly from an old radio, and Marcus would pull Eleanor close, whispering, "Still my favorite dance partner," and she'd smile, resting her head against his chest, replying, "Always will be." They never forgot that one moment years ago, when a janitor found the courage to ask a nurse to dance, never realizing he was asking for a lifetime with someone who valued hearts over bank accounts and kindness over titles. Because real love, they learned, doesn't care about status or last names. It doesn't ask where you come from. It asks who you are when no one's watching. It's about showing up, truly seeing each other, and having the courage to reach across the invisible divide that only exists in our minds. Sometimes, the greatest treasures in life come disguised in simple uniforms, carrying mop buckets and medical charts, waiting for someone brave enough to look beyond the surface. If this story touched your heart, take a moment to like and share it with someone who needs to be reminded that love sees beyond circumstances, and don't forget to subscribe for more heartwarming stories that celebrate the unexpected connections that change our lives. Tell us in the comments, have you ever had a moment when someone saw you for who you truly are, not for what you do or where you come from?